again, we're based in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, not far from here. Although right now I am outside of Philadelphia in Ardmore.
All right, Bryan.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bryan Buttler. I am the owner of Bryan Buttler Media Relations. I work primarily with clients in the arts, entertainment, and leisure industries across the greater Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Trenton, and Allentown markets. Recently, I was very lucky to work with R. Eric Thomas and his premiere book, Here For It, when he came to Philadelphia. He was looking for some more regional approach to the public relations and was glad to work with him through that. So I'm thrilled to be part of the panel and looking forward to talking about the great world of marketing right now.
Thank you, Bryan. And Jackie?
Hi, I'm Jackie, and I work as a literary publicist with Books Forward. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee here, but we also have offices in New York City and in New Orleans. Previously, we were known as JKS Communications, and we recently rebranded to Books Forward, just to better reflect our mission to elevate authors and their work moving the world forward with their books. Day to day, I work with authors of all types. I work with books that are genre fiction, literary fiction, nonfiction, short stories, poetry, and more. And I just am so happy that I get to be here with you all today, and I'm really excited to get started.
Fantastic. So I'm going to get started on my initial questions for the panelists. We have structured in some time for audience questions as well. You can submit those through the chat, as Alex mentioned at the start of the panel. And I will be keeping an eye on the chat in case there's anything particularly relevant, like follow-up questions or anything of that nature that I should be asking, while we're still on topic. So to start off with, a big question that authors very frequently have when starting the marketing and publicity process comes down to author platform. So how do you define author platform, and how can authors work to build their platform before or just as they're signing a book deal?
Sure. I'd be happy to get started there. This is Marissa. I think that author platform, today is so dependent upon the individual author and their genre, their area of expertise, their passion, where their audience lies. It really is so important that it vary. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan. And so I think today, when it comes to author platform, I always think about it as a puzzle, and there's all these pieces to the puzzle. Publicity is certainly going to be one piece of it, traditional media, but social media presence, identifying the right social media platforms for where your audience lives, how you're marketing, how you're, kind of speaking to the public. These are all pieces to your overall author platform. But I think ultimately it's really about, where does your presence kind of direct, what you're putting out there, and how are you reaching the right target audience for your project? You don't have to be everything for everyone.
I can jump into, I think one piece that is becoming more and more critical is the social media piece. I have seen authors, artists of all types, who have really been able to hone in their messaging and recruit a really loyal fan base through their social media, depending on which platform that their voice, I think, fits the most. I think that's really critical. I think another thing that we've got to talk about now when we're talking about platform, period, for anyone, is tying in the extremely odd social situation we are in right now, living in a pandemic. And I've seen so many different organizations and individuals have to, I hate using this word, pivot into something a little bit different. But I think authors and books in particular have a little bit of a leg up right now with this, simply because it's something that can be done at home and safely. And I've seen a variety of folks really jump on that part of their platform as well. What supplementary materials can they put out online? Complementary, what kind of podcasts, what kind of videos can be created? But I think right now we're living in both sort of the best time and the worst time too. And there's lots of opportunities, I think, to gain social traction with supplementary materials right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with the prevalence of social media and the way that authors are able to use that right now, especially since a lot of us are spending so much time at home. It almost feels like there's very little else to do other than to be on social media and to read lots of books. So with my clients, we've been seeing a lot of ebook and audiobook recognition lately, just because some of those have a more accessible pricing and instantaneous downloads, and ways in which you can combine your sort of focus on ebook or audiobook promotion in addition to working on social media and communicating with other authors or readers through those platforms. We've seen some good traction in those areas. And I'll also mention as well that building your personal reader newsletter and growing subscribers for your reader newsletter is another way to engage with readers, but also to, if you can offer an excerpt of your book that's longer than the excerpt that might be offered by Amazon or another distributor, or you can offer different free materials, advice, guidelines, anything to get subscribers to your newsletter is a great way to have that one-to-one connection with readers that sometimes can feel more drowned out in social media, or if you have a lot of members of your readership who maybe don't spend as much time on social media, that's another great way to make that connection as well.
Great.
I'll add one more thing in there just from Jackie, what Jackie said there about connection. And I think that, again, we all feel so disconnected from each other physically right now. And it feels as though that there's too much on social media. There's too much online to be able to break through. But truly, as Jackie said, everybody's online right now. We're all kind of spending our time there. And so I think that, again, if you're targeting your content to the right people, they're going to find you. You're getting it out there in these different ways. They're going to find you. So it's allowing just such a wonderful way to connect with each other, where social media gets a bad rap otherwise, but it's not too bad right now.
All right. So building platform is definitely something that authors should be working on before signing their book deals is kind of what I'm hearing. Yeah. So networking is another thing that tends to be really helpful, especially while working on building your platform. But current restrictions, especially on gatherings, are really changing how those two activities can be conducted. So what are your recommendations for authors to work on building their platform and building their network while still in quarantine?
I'd be happy to jump in there. Yeah, I think that, again, it is truly through online, finding local organizations, finding local writers groups that you can be a part of, that you can become active with, who are meeting regularly. One of our clients was just telling me the other day, he's part of the National Press Club. And within the National Press Club, they actually have an independent writers group. There's about 36 people who get together every month, and different experts come and give them information regularly. So, there are ways to connect, to support each other, through this. So I think that just, doing your research and looking for, starting locally is definitely the easiest way to go. But even digging into Goodreads, looking for certain genre groups in Goodreads and becoming active there. I just think that there's a lot of ways to still connect with one another, even if it's not in person, which us publicists love, I think, when we can be in person together.
I also add on too, I think this is a real opportune time for actual public relations and media relations and getting placements in the press. Depending on the outlet that you're looking at, some outlets that cover things like the arts, like entertainment, like writing, they are hungry for content right now. I mean, because there's a lot of things that aren't happening. I mean, what just was announced yesterday, that Broadway is not going to come back to May 2021. There is this opportunity for writers who are particularly staff writers looking for stories in the lifestyle area that I think it's a great time to have a firm press plan and build networking that way. The more you can expose yourself to a wider assortment of individuals who didn't know who you were before, is kind of the name of the game in a sense. So I think it's definitely an opportune time to look at ways to get press placements.
I'll also add on to that. I think a lot of what I've been hearing recently from local independent booksellers and librarians is, you know, some of them are facing some extreme challenges, but they're still interested in meeting authors, in supporting authors, and figuring out ways in which they can build those connections. So this might be if you're a little bit farther along in your writing journey, but it's especially useful, I think, you know, even if you can't, typically we would work with our clients on setting up in-person meet and greets with librarians and booksellers to introduce yourself, show them a copy of your book, an advanced copy if you have one, and make that very personal connection. But now, if you can't meet with them physically in person, it's still a good idea to try to make yourself known as a member of the literary community who cares about what they're doing and how they're supporting authors, and doing your best to support them back. So I think if you're able to, you know, attending some of their events and programs, asking them how you can help to draw more visitors to their platforms or draw more attendees to their events will help you to stand out, just because it shows that you're very conscientious of their importance in the industry and the ways in which they've been struggling since the pandemic started and limiting in-person interactions. But you can still do that networking. I think it'll be maybe a little bit more challenging, but you can make phone calls, do emails, and just let them know that you're there to be a helping hand. And I think that would be a really nice gesture.
All right, that's fantastic. I'm a big independent bookstore person myself. So another kind of like big thing that authors want to talk about is book promotion. So we've been talking a lot about book promotion, but what are some of the ways that authors can promote their books both before and after publication day? Because there's a lot of focus on, you know, that advanced copy, that, you know, pre-pub publication and publicity, but what can authors do maybe after pub day, after maybe things have started to cool down from their perspective?
I think it depends on the genre and what you're looking at. I can give you a really good example with R. Eric Thomas's book, Here For It. It's actually kind of funny. When he started doing readings, he had printed himself a very small amount of church fans with the cover of the book on it, and people started to take selfies with them, a very small amount. These fans became almost bigger than the book in a sense. He found a way to tie a piece of content from the book into an actual physical piece of marketing collateral that, I mean, they had to finally get them professionally printed in mass quantities because people were wanting the fans if they were going to get the book from him. So I thought that was a really brilliant little PR built into his own promotion after the publication, actually finding something tangible that related to the book and producing it and sending those out not only to his readers, but to press as well. So if there's an opportunity with what you're writing with, you know, depending again on genre, to maybe create something besides the book to send out, it can really take off. And again, the power of social media, having folks pose with that item or a certain photo maybe you can upload to your website, or a certain Zoom background as it relates to the book. Maybe you convert the cover of your book to a Zoom background. All that kind of collateral marketing, I think, is a really cool way to help promote, and you never know how it's going to take off.
I'll add to that as well. I find that if you're working on promotion for a book after its publication date, it can be really helpful if you're able to tie it to another date of some kind. And as an example for that, I'm currently working with a book that was published in February, and the author is a film scholar. Her name is Christina Lane, and she is writing about an unknown woman in Hollywood. She's a biographer who was very crucial in building the career of Alfred Hitchcock. And people are not aware of this woman or the work that she did. So she had press that was occurring during February in her book launch. But now with the holiday season, everybody's into streaming Hitchcock movies, and there's a lot of independent theaters that are sending out Zoom links or doing drive-in, safe distancing methods of screening those movies. And additionally, there's a 80th anniversary for the film Rebecca, and they're doing a remake of that film on Netflix later this month. So we were able to sort of capitalize on the fact that there is that 80-year anniversary happening, that there is a new remake coming on Netflix, and a lot of film writers are focusing on Hitchcock for the Halloween season. They're focusing on the anniversary and on the Netflix remake. So we were able to work with her on using that holiday as a tie-in for her book, and continuing to get more film interest and more coverage surrounding that. And a colleague of mine is doing something similar right now with a previously published work that connects with Florence Nightingale, and I think there's a big anniversary on Florence Nightingale this year as well. So if you have anything attached to your book that maybe has a National Monthly Holiday tie-in or some other kind of date-specific tie-in, that can really help in communications, just so that when you're coordinating that coverage, there's a specific date where you can kind of say, I'm looking for media surrounding this date. And that helps a lot, I think, as well.
I'll add in there just around kind of those timely tie-ins. I think those specific dates and awareness months. We're working with someone who has a book around mentoring, and January is National Mentoring Month. Who knew? But we figured that out as we were doing research to get started working with her. And so whenever you get the chance to tie into those awareness months too. But I think at the same time, in terms of timeliness, it might feel as though it's hard to break through with anything that might be pandemic or election related, but we've actually gotten tons of coverage connected to the pandemic or the election. With this particular client who's focused on mentoring, we're really looking at, how are you mentoring virtually? How are you talking about, she's writing articles, she's doing podcast interviews. Her book actually came out a few years ago. It's actually 3 years old at this point, but we're doing what we call more personality cultivation at Smith. So we're really working on getting her name out there through these expert type pieces and really being able to tie that into the pain points that people are experiencing right now, in the world, and making that really relevant. So I think especially for nonfiction, expert individuals, or those who have kind of just the background to support what they're writing about, there's definitely that opportunity to tie into, find your connection to the pandemic. Is it a children's book, or you can talk about, something parents are struggling with while kids are at home with school? I was on the other side for fiction or for poetry. We're really big fans of the Bookstagrammer community. And so that's definitely a space that you can hit hard leading up to publication date, but keep going with well beyond when the book is available, and just do that deep dive research into those influential accounts where people are covering your genre. So I think that's another great thing to keep diving into, post-publication.
Great. So Marissa mentioned a little bit that the spaces are getting a little crowded, especially things like pandemic and the election, and trying to find some way to stand out in kind of the more crowded space, more competitive space. How can authors find innovative ways to stand out, especially now with a wide variety of virtual event opportunities. People are always online now. What are some of the ways that authors can try to look for innovative ways just to stand out in this kind of like screaming into the abyss?
I'll jump in. I think, Bryan mentioned earlier kind of creating unique collateral to go with your whatever you're doing, not just your book launch, but if you're doing a workshop or a program or a Q&A, kind of create these unique elements to add into what you're doing. I think in kind of making your project, your events, whatever you're doing online stand out, creating your own hashtags, that can kind of get people excited around a very specific hashtag, something very specific for your book, for your author platform, kind of creating those ways in which people can connect to something and keep bringing more people into it along the way. So, I mentioned earlier, not trying to be everything for everyone. Otherwise, you're not going to reach those really targeted audiences that you're going to be able to engage with. You have to be okay with the fact that you're not going to be able to reach every single person with everything that you do. But you can have a really, condensed, passionate audience connecting with you if you're sending out the right materials and creating this collateral that can go with it and make it feel unique, not just a book reading or a Q&A, but how can you make it feel unique, as well, and if they're participating in something you're doing.
I also say looking at partnerships and collaborations is really important right now. And even maybe organizations or groups that you would not normally partner with or think to partner with. Again, because we're in this sort of echo chamber of online content right now, there's so many Zoom talkbacks and stuff like that. But there's some extremely interesting orgs I've seen that are doing sort of themed sessions around different things. So maybe reaching out to organizations that you would not normally reach out to beyond, let's say, your local library. Maybe reach out to the local museum, especially if there's some sort of crossover themes to see what they're doing with online content or maybe even in-person content. I think also working just with your peers too. There's a lot of social sort of promotion that's happening. To give a really good example, you may have seen nationally and internationally the Red Alert for We Make Events. It's a coalition of live event organizers and employees who are kind of trying to make a national presence on, there has to be some sort of action politically for assistance. I knew quite a few organizations and nonprofits in the arts, for writers, actors, performers, who joined together with that and got some great PR out of it. So I think there are definite right opportunities right now to look for ways to partner and look for ways to join different organizations that can really expose you again to a much wider network.
I think that's, a great takeaway message is to definitely consider different groups, different organizations, communities, nonprofits, things that you wouldn't typically look into otherwise. And I also think if you're struggling in that area and what you're finding the most traction with is virtual bookstore events or virtual events with your libraries, there are even ways within those types of events that you can make yourself stand out from other events that may be going on that same day or that same week. That way you can make an effort to boost attendance and to boost sales along with that. I was recently at the SIBA, Southern Independent Bookseller Association's conference, and it was, a virtual conference much like this. And some of the booksellers were mentioning ways in which authors had pitched original types of ideas for events and ways in which those boosted sales and helped with attendance. And some of the ones that stood out to me were, are you willing to promote your virtual event just as much as you would promote an in-person event? And some authors were jumping on Instagram Live, Facebook Live a couple hours before their event and making that sort of face-to-face connection, saying, I'm going to be doing an event. I would really appreciate if you would show up and support the local independent bookseller. Here's what's going on. And that, I thought that was a little bit unique. And also, you know, anything where you can kind of incorporate swag, maybe if you're interested in doing like free gifts for the first 15 people who reserve their tickets at your virtual event, and then you're willing to maybe sign some book plates and mail them out, or something even a little bit more elaborate than that. Those are just small ways if you're looking to stand out in the virtual event space for bookstores or libraries, that at least some of those booksellers that I spoke to mentioned that they'd seen some success from. And I think those would be good things to try out if you're interested in that.
I'd add one more piece in there too, just off of what Bryan said earlier about connecting with certain organizations, and Jackie mentioned nonprofits. I think that everyone's very much in a mind of giving back. How can we support others through this experience, especially as we head into the holiday season? We're going to be even more thinking about how we can, you know, do things that are charitable. So another way to kind of have yourself stand out is maybe adding in an element of a donation from, you know, the sales of your book, adding in some kind of, again, piece of swag that maybe connects back to a donation, and seeing if, you know, if it has to do with animal rescue that you're giving back to, you know, is there a local shelter you can be partnering with so that they're maybe sharing it through their social media platforms, and you're getting that kind of cross promotion there, but it's cross promotion because we're all doing, you know, a good charitable thing together. So I think that's another key piece of where people are really focused on, you know, today.
These are so many great ideas. Thank you all so much. So 2020 has really done a number on book selling. So based on your own experiences, both before and during this year, what do you think will look different for book marketing and promotion in kind of a post-pandemic industry landscape?
I think we're, the reoccurring theme I think we've seen so far today is this idea of recreating and getting creative, right? That maybe the traditional things that we think about with any type of promotion are not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, I'm not seeing anyone doing a face-to-face reading or anything like that for a while. So I think how it's going to change is looking at ways to monetize how we present digitally. And I'm going to explain a little bit. I work with a lot of performing arts industries, and there's been at first this real fear to put a dollar amount behind some of this online content that they were putting out. And there's a variety of reasons for it. Have to deal with performers unions and stuff like that. But now that some of that's being worked out, what I'm seeing and what a lot of the organizations that I work with are seeing is that putting a dollar amount on online content actually increases its value. It then means you have to, you've paid $25 or $30 to access this experience. You're going to do it, and you're going to have to be invested in it. I think authors can maybe look at, I think this means maybe the industry as a whole, ways that we can use digital content to actually make a profit and to not feel bad about charging for some of this content as it's being created and put out, especially if the traditional means of promotion are not going to be what they were used to. I think we got to look at these other streams of income and how can this digital world actually make some money. I don't think there's a solid answer as to what that looks like yet, but I think there are some creative ways that content can definitely be monetized and therefore also help boost your own personal exposure to those who purchase it.
That's a really great point there, Bryan. And I'll follow. We actually have a particular client who is planning a traditional book launch in early next year, but she's also thinking about with the ebook. It's kind of a self-help mindfulness type book, and usually she would do some kind of led meditations or kind of yoga practice if she were to do a live event. Well, she's actually creating this unique ebook that you can click on certain aspects of it, and a video will pop up of a led meditation. And so while you're experiencing the book, you're actually experiencing what would have been done in a virtual or in an in-person opportunity. You're experiencing it virtually. So I think there's some really creative ways that we can use what we already know, audiobooks or ebooks or whatever it's going to be, and we can, think about, we have technology on our side to think about these unique ways in which we can create this more interactive experience. And I think from the author side too, understanding that, content diversity is so important. It's not just written content. It's not just writing out another, blog post or writing another social media post, but how are you interacting through video? Since you can't be in person, kind of what video content are you creating that's, building that kind of face-to-face connection without the actual face-to-face. And so, those are, I think, some unique ways that that kind of the world's going to keep changing as we move forward, is finding those ways to interact without actually being together. And we're even seeing it, I think, too, from the traditional media side, when it comes to television in particular. All of our major shows and our local shows, they're, doing everything by Zoom, by WebEx, by Skype, whatever, is preferred. And I think that authors really need to be ready to be comfortable with virtual interviews for a while. We have some authors who still come to us and say, I really don't want to use Skype. I don't know how to use Zoom. And we're like, we've got to figure this out. It's that's becoming the new social media. Social media, we had that battle for a while. You've got to be on social. Now you've got to figure out how to be present and interactive on virtual opportunities. And that's also opened up the door to opportunities you wouldn't have had if it were in person. We're seeing our clients being interviewed on, Good Day Sacramento when they're based in Philadelphia. You're getting the chance to reach these other audiences that you wouldn't really have been able to if they were more kind of locally focused before. So there are some good things that'll come out of this, I think.
Yeah, I've been hearing, in Library Journal from librarians and also just from booksellers that I've been speaking to, that a lot of them don't expect virtual events to disappear completely, even when it becomes safer to do in person again. For a lot of, I think libraries in particular, and maybe some booksellers would agree, it was difficult for a while to shift into the virtual sphere because their patrons weren't used to using those platforms and they didn't have a reason to learn. And it would have been really difficult to try to make that transition at an earlier time. But once they've kind of gotten over that hump now, where the learning curve is mostly behind them and most of their patrons feel comfortable attending virtual events and using the technology, they see a sort of benefit to continuing in-person events and also doing some online for people who aren't able to get out of the house as much, for single parents who may not be able to get out, or people who have limited access to transportation. Just making that new connection with patrons through combining in-person and virtual later is a bit of what they're expecting. And I think from the way that I see that for my clients and the authors that I'm working with, they can, like Marissa said, get the best of both worlds in a way, where they're able to do the in-person, face-to-face connections and have a celebration with all their friends and family in the local sphere, but maybe do those virtual events or virtual TV interviews or Zoom interviews with people from all over the country or even internationally. Some bookstores have been hosting events for international authors and having international attendance and international sales, which is something that's really unique. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to sort of make the best of either situation as we're moving forward.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Now that is the end of moderator questions for the panelists. I do not see any questions in the group chat, but you can feel free to just pop any questions you have if you want clarification, or if you would like to ask about additional details on anything any of the panelists have said. I'll just read them off as they come along. Actually, one topic that we didn't really get to that some authors who are watching might be a little interested in. Do you have recommendations, particularly for authors who are interested in, or who have children's books, who may be interested in reaching out to libraries and to schools specifically, how they can work on developing virtual events or other kind of outreach to improve that sort of aspect of marketing publicity?
Well, I'm just thinking about how you may want to reach out with, know what you're asking for, first of all. What type of event are you hoping to host, if it's a story time event, and if you've done any previous talks, it may be helpful to send in an outline of what you plan on doing and being very specific with whoever you're reaching out to, a librarian. And in previous years, we've done special sort of worksheets and story time, materials, coloring pages, things like that, that can keep kids entertained, craft projects, just offering those free materials to libraries that they've really appreciated in the past. Now with it being virtual, that might be a little bit more difficult, but you still might be able to offer some PDF handouts or virtual handouts that they can send out, maybe in an email to parents if they have the access to a printer that they can print out certain coloring pages or certain activities for their kids, to coordinate with a reading or any activities that you may have planned. I think librarians are receptive to events right now. I worked with the teen services librarian on doing a sort of teen presentation earlier, and I'm working with librarians again for my author who's an expert in film to just do a brief, fun mini lecture for their patrons to learn about women in film. So in my experience, I've seen that they've been receptive. I think you just have to know exactly what you're asking for and also be mindful of the librarian's goals or the school's goals and how you can help them accomplish those goals through what you're doing. They'll respond better if they know that you're mindful of where they're coming from.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think the early maybe silence of all of us bringing our thoughts together. I think schools in particular are tough right now. I'd be lying if I said that we haven't really done too much outreach to schools. I think schools are still figuring out, parents are figuring out, teachers, everybody's figuring out what they're doing right now. And it's so different. That's the thing. Based on your market, it's so incredibly different, based on the experience. So some are hybrid, some are all at home, some are in person. And certainly those that are in person are not going to be bringing in anyone they don't have to be bringing into their buildings for any kind of readings. And so I think anything that might be possible with schools is definitely going to remain virtual for quite a while. And I think being really clear about how you're going to be presenting virtually is really important. Again, probably not just a reading, but how are you creating this kind of interactive experience? I think some of those ideas that you shared, Jackie, are really great. They can be sent along ahead of time to the teachers to send out for kids to print off, or maybe there's some kind of digital experience for them, something on the author's website, which I think there might be a question about in the chat I was seeing. So, but the author's website can be a great place to kind of store that information and be able to have a game they can play or an interactive element in some way. But I think just being really clear as to what your virtual presentation will be and what the elements of it will be it's going to be important as we start to navigate our way back into schools again.
I'd also add, because the school situation is so strange, that you might want to look at independent bookstores. That was brought up again. I know the parents I know or I'm friends with, they're dying for things to do with their kids, especially if they're doing this virtual education stuff. I think personally the one that's close to me, one of the largest independent booksellers by me, I think they would totally love the idea of having supplemental content for parents who want to stop in, buy the children's book, and have, whether maybe it's a video link or some sort of collateral. I think that's a really great way to go. Another thing to look at too, outside the traditional sort of K-12 school, is to look at other organizations that offer sort of after school stuff, or organizations that might have normally done or are still operating art classes or theater classes online, or different types of after school activities. For them right now, it's about making money. It's still about how many students can they get into one of these virtual settings. So I think a lot of them, if there was the opportunity, let's say, to partner with a children's book writer to maybe theme one of their classes around that particular book and have the content there to assist, it could be a really creative sort of win-win for both the author, but also for that school who is, offering those types of classes. Right now, I know a lot of those types of organizations are getting super creative with what they can do. They would probably love to have that kind of connection.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget about like your aquariums and your zoos and like all these other places that are not getting the usual attendance that they would have. I think that there's, for kids' books, there's so many different opportunities. And then everybody is going to pick pumpkins and go to corn mazes right now. And, what types of outdoor, events that are going on, especially as we head into the holidays, that you can connect your project to, where, parents are dying to get their children out. Where are they going, and how can you possibly connect to them to those places that they are actually going to?
Great, and since we did touch on this just a little bit, there is a question regarding the importance of having a writer's website and how important it is to have a website before being published, which I'm going to sort of amend that into before pub day and or before signing a book deal with a publisher.
Yeah, I would say we're big advocates for the author website. I think that it's so critical that you have this one-stop shop for people to find all of your social media links, to find, all of the updated, media that you've been getting, have your bio there, have your inspiration for your story, all of these elements. That one-stop shop is so important. I would say, prior to getting the book deal, I think the more established you can show that you are, the better. That I heard from a publisher that we've worked with that they'd rather have a good author with a great social media following than a great author with a good social media following fairly recently. And I mean, that's saying something to the power of your presence and the power of the credibility that you're establishing for yourself. Of course, that great writing is still important, but what is that presence that you have? So I think the website, the social platforms, they want to see you're ahead of the game before you're going to get that publishing deal. So I definitely advise to at least get those pieces up there. You might not have all the media to put up there yet. You might not have the thousands of followers you would want to have, but you're showing that you're working on it. And I think that's really important.
I think the website, this is like marketing 101, I would argue. It is critical because the first thing people are going to do is Google you. Recently, I had a potential client contact me, totally not related to the publishing world or the arts world, and I Googled this organization. They were nowhere. There was no website anywhere, which, and as I told them in my proposal, I said, even if you do not use me and don't want PR, here are a list of web designers that I can refer you to. You've got to create a website because no one can find you. No one knows who you are and what you do. So I think it's critical. And even if maybe the first product of your website isn't 100% what you want it to ultimately be before publication day, at least having something that when people Google you comes up and it's your official way of presenting yourself, I think it's absolutely critical no matter what industry that we're looking at.
I will add briefly from the publisher perspective also, if you have not yet signed a book deal, please don't put information about your book on your website. Please don't do that. It's very often in the acquisition process, things like titles will change, things like book summaries might even change depending on how in-depth your editor is going to go. So that is not necessarily the best. Your website should be about you and not about your book quite yet. I'll move on to our other audience question. And again, if anyone else has questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. This one is for Bryan, but I think it can really be open to anyone. But do you know of anyone who's had success with a talking head video segment on their newsletter or blog?
It's a very distinct, good question. And I'm going to talk about, I think, at large about newsletters, just as a whole. So I kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. I think that they're really great in certain instances, and other times, I think we've all been there when we've been bombarded in our inbox with a bunch of stuff that maybe we initially signed up for that we're wishing that we didn't. And I know for me, one of the biggest indicators of success for an e-blast is really looking at the click-through rate when I go in the back end of, say, MailChimp. You can send stuff out all you want, but if people aren't opening it and aren't clicking it, what's the point? So what I've seen with using video, all right, in, let's say, an e-blast, is teasing that out in the title. So usually what I'll do if I'm creating the e-blast is the title. I'll put in all caps, video, colon, see, John Smith talk about the progression of whatever. And then once they get into that e-blast, I don't embed the video. I embed maybe a still frame of that video that once they click leads to the website where they actually can see it. So it drives the volume from the video back to the website, which is what you want people ultimately to do, right? You want to get them onto that product page, onto that website. So, and that's the case. I've definitely seen success rates where you can link the idea that there's a video content, it's clear up in that subject line, and then it links people directly to what you want them to see. Blog-wise, I mean, who knows? It really depends. Again, I think what would probably be the smartest way to approach it is maybe create the blog on your website with that video content, and then use the e-blast, use a social media tease, maybe with like a 10-second clip of the video with a link again to the website to watch the rest of it. That's probably the best marketing approach I would use to using sort of a talking heads video in both an e-blast and then also on social media. The goal should be to get the people to your website, to find out more about you, to purchase your product, to purchase your book, to register for something. So that would be the biggest advice I would give about that and its success.
Marissa and Jackie, do you have anything else to add on top of that?
No, I think Bryan really covered, that perfectly there. And I think that click-through rate is so important. There was one thing I want to go back to the websites quickly that I thought about, and because this comes up very often with our authors, is please make the web address your author name and not the title of your book. Keep yourself open to the possibility that you might want to write more books in the future. Create that persona, that platform for yourself. And I guess, again, when you're creating it related to your specific book title or something that's very specific to one project you're working on, you're definitely limiting yourself to future titles you're working on. So it was just a thought that came in there that I think is so important to drive home, is go with the author name or something that's overarching wherever you can.
All right, I'm going to just give one last call for audience questions, and then we'll wrap up because we are getting down to the last 10 minutes of our panel here.
Hi, Feliza, this is Alex.
Yes.
I'm the host here, but I actually have a question myself as well.
Sure.
Um, where would you suggest drawing the line between what you do yourself and what you get help to do? You've all said at one point or another, I think, during this that that you like the listener here have to do this for yourself, and um, people are obviously very on different curves with social media and web design and all these things. Like, how do you know when it's worth it to kind of dive into that and try to make your own Squarespace website versus oh my god, help?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to vary per person and based on your your skills and what you feel comfortable with. I think anyone's kind of going to run up against a point where they feel like they've hit a bit of a roadblock with developing their own website or executing their own social media strategy. I think that publicity is probably one of the pieces where I usually advise bringing in the experts. It's just going to take you a whole lot longer to do it on your own, trying to find the contacts and build those relationships that Bryan mentioned earlier on, how critical those relationships are and with the media. And I think bringing in the experts for publicity, if and it could be supplemental to support that you're getting from your in-house team at your publisher. Definitely, talk through what areas they're covering, what goals you have, and then explore whether or not you want to bring in some supplemental support, into that too. But I think that, with the other pieces, there's a lot of different services that are out there on more of a consultative basis, where you can work with individuals. We provide those at Smith to a degree, kind of consultation on website, on social media. So if you feel like you hit that roadblock, but you want to try to push forward a little more on your own, you might look for some kind of consultation services versus full-on social media execution or full-on website development. So kind of work through those steps along the way.
I'd also argue too, and I'm seeing this across all sort of areas of PR right now, don't necessarily think because you have a list of contacts that you will become a publicist. I'm not kidding. There seems to be, I think now, and I get it, money's tight. People are really struggling to prioritize business priorities for their projects. Just because you have a list of contacts does not make you proficient 100% in PR. I agree 100% that publicity piece, especially the media relations, you probably want to contract somebody out. And the same thing, I think, with the whole concept of designing something that you're proud of. One of the things I like to recommend to everybody is look at somebody you admire for how they market themselves. Whose website, whose author website does it just blow your mind because you love it so much and you think it's so great? Look at what they're doing and look at who they're working with. Now, in some cases, it may be fiscally completely prohibitive to work with those same people, but you'd be really surprised just by digging and asking even like your colleagues and your friends, do you have a web designer friend who's looking for work right now? Do you have somebody who is really good with marketing and PR? There are a bunch of us smaller firms who we are, a lot more affordable and reasonable and easy to work with than, say, a large conglomerate. So definitely look at your networks, look at who you admire, and talk to people. Know the individuals in this business who do it right. And definitely, I always tell people, I think when you need the help. Like they'll kind of be something and you're like, you know what, I really need like a consultant on this. And reach out and find the one that's the best fit. Do some speed dating with that too, so far as finding the best fit. Not everyone who's a publicist, not everyone who is a marketer is the best fit for who you are and what your product is.
I'll add, again, from an in-house perspective, which is what I do, that your best and most effective use of hiring a publicist will very likely be in your own local area and engaging with your own network If you know that you have a good network, if you know that you've worked with people in your community before who you can reach out to individually, our authors very often have a lot more success locally than we do in their local area, because we work more with, you know, the national level or book industry side of publicity marketing. So if you want to look at hiring publicists or look at doing your own legwork, definitely start in your own local community. And we have a couple minutes left, so I do want to go through this last audience question. So just real quick, are there any resources that you would like to re-emphasize, including like websites you might want to research, groups authors may want to join, just for anyone who may have missed it earlier in the video?
I'll say for a particular specific resource, and we talked again the importance of the newsletter management. There's actually a fairly local company called AWeber that we work with at Smith. They have a really wonderful kind of back end, very user-friendly experience for building out your newsletter and managing it, and really kind of being able to monitor all those click-through rates and the opens, and just seeing what people are engaging with. So I would just say we talked a lot about that newsletter strategy here, and we use them for our own Smith newsletter. So we're big fans of that particular resource. And I would say too, just Readsy as a whole, there's just so many great resources there of information, finding kind of independent individuals who are specializing in certain spaces. If you're feeling like the bigger agency isn't the right fit for you for different aspects of what you're looking for, it's certainly grown extensively with so many individuals. We're moving into freelancing these days that it can just be a great resource for for just finding those who might be able to help you out with what you're looking for.
This is another website that I'm not super familiar with, but I've heard a lot of authors say that they've enjoyed using it. It's called the Op-Ed Project, and it's helpful for authors who are looking to place articles or op-eds, maybe with Writer's Digest if you're on more of a fiction side, or in a niche news area or a larger general news area, if you have a news angle or hook that's closely tied to your writing and is attached to your brand and what you want to promote yourself as an expert in. So if you're interested in like exploring that area of writing and placing articles or pitching op-eds to different areas, I've heard that as a sort of DIY learning experience, the Op-Ed Project has been helpful for some people.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. Oh, I guess my kids have been using this, and now I'm in outer space. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Feliza, for keeping everything together. Thank you, Bryan and Jackie and Marissa. I just want to mention, for those of you who may have popped in later, as a reminder, these sessions are all being recorded. So we'll send out links after the whole conference is done. So if you want to catch something that you may have missed, you can catch up then. Next segment will be starting in 15 minutes. And if you have anything that you want to do in between times, great. Check back with the agenda page to let you know where you will be. Thank you again. Have a great day.